The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Subspace has measurable properties. Warp fields follow predictable mathematics. Even the wormhole near Bajorans, touched by beings the locals call prophets, can be charted and analyzed. But what happens when something tears through the fabric of reality itself, dragging with it the physics of an entirely different universe? Deep Space Nine's sensor arrays lit up with impossible readings at 0347 hours station time. Chief Miles O'Brien jerked awake in his quarters, his comm badge chirping with urgent priority. "O'Brien, get to ops. Now." Major Kira's voice carried an edge he'd learned to recognize, the tone that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. He materialized on the operations deck 3 minutes later, still fastening his uniform jacket. The central display showed a spatial anomaly 20,000 kilometers off the station's port bow, pulsing with energy signatures that made absolutely no sense. Subspace was tearing itself apart in ways that violated every principle of warp field dynamics. "What am I looking at?" Captain Benjamin Sisko stood at the railing above ops, his command presence filling the space even at this early hour. Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax's hands flew across her science console, her spotted brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm not entirely sure, Benjamin. It's not a wormhole, the subspace topology is all wrong. It's more like, reality is folding in on itself." "Folding?" Sisko descended the steps, moving to stand beside her station. "The dimensional barriers between our universe and something else are collapsing." Dax looked up, and O'Brien saw genuine concern in the eyes of someone who'd lived 8 lifetimes. "Whatever's coming through, it doesn't belong here." The view screen flared white. Energy cascaded outward in patterns that hurt to look at, not photons behaving as they should, but light twisted through geometries that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. The station's shields automatically engaged, buckling under the shockwave of distorted spacetime. Then she emerged from the rift. The ship was enormous, easily twice the length of a Galaxy-class starship, her hull a masterwork of engineering that blended curves and angles in ways Starfleet designers had never conceived. Gold and bronze metal caught the light of Bayer Sun, and even at this distance, O'Brien could see the elegant script along her hull, Andromeda Ascendant. "Mother of God," he whispered. The vessel hung in space like a predator assessing its surroundings. Her design spoke of raw power, massive hangar bays, weapon ports that could only be called offensive systems, and a profile that said this ship was built for war first and exploration second. Yet there was beauty in her lines, a grace that suggested her builders had believed in something beyond mere survival. "Shields at maximum," Kira ordered, her Bajoran pragmatism kicking in. "Weapons hot. Hail them." "Wait." Sisko raised a hand. "Scan them first. I want to know what we're dealing with." Dax's console chimed rapidly. "Captain, their power generation is off the scale. The energy output suggests technology decades beyond our own. I'm reading what might be a propulsion system, but it's nothing like a warp drive. And Benjamin," she paused, her voice dropping. "There's an artificial intelligence running that ship. Not just a computer. An AI with processing capacity that makes data look like a tricorder." On the view screen, the Andromeda's running lights pulsed in a pattern that might have been communication. Or might have been a targeting sequence. "Open a channel," Sisko commanded. "All frequencies." The view screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a bridge that belonged in a museum of lost civilizations. A man stood at its center, tall and commanding in a uniform that mixed military precision with an aesthetic that felt ancient and futuristic simultaneously. His eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen civilizations fall. "This is Captain Dylan Hunt of the Andromeda Ascendant, High Guard vessel of the Systems Commonwealth." His voice carried across the void, clear and measured. "We seem to have experienced a navigational error. Can you tell us where we are?" Sisko stepped forward, his diplomatic training engaging even as every instinct screamed that this was no ordinary first contact. I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko, commanding Deep Space Nine. You're in the Bajoran system, Alpha Quadrant. Welcome to the United Federation of Planets. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Though I have to ask, what's the Systems Commonwealth? The man on the screen, Dylan Hunt, exchanged glances with someone off camera. When he looked back, something like hope and grief warred in his expression. The Commonwealth was an alliance of worlds spanning 3 galaxies, dedicated to peace, prosperity, and the advancement of all sentient species. It fell 300 years ago. He straightened. I'm trying to restore it. Behind Sisko, O'Brien heard Dax's sharp intake of breath. The chief engineer understood immediately what she'd realized. This wasn't just a ship from another universe. This was a ship from a dead dream, carrying the ghost of a civilization that had tried to be what the Federation was, and failed. Captain Hunt, Sisko said slowly, I think we need to talk. Would you be willing to come aboard the station? On the view screen, Hunt nodded. On one condition. My ship is my responsibility. Any attempt to board her without permission, any hostile action toward my crew, and we will defend ourselves. Are we clear? The words weren't a threat. They were a promise from a man who'd lost too much to lose anything else. Crystal clear, Sisko replied. I'll have one of our runabouts escort you in. Sisko out. The channel closed. In the silence that followed, Kira moved to stand beside the captain. That ship could take out half the fleet before we scratched her paint. I know, Sisko said quietly, his eyes fixed on the Andromeda as she hung in space, a stranger in a strange universe. That's what worries me. That, and the fact that he's trying to rebuild something that already destroyed itself once. On the view screen, the Andromeda's lights pulsed again. This time, O'Brien was certain it was a greeting. Or perhaps a warning. The Federation was about to meet a mirror of itself, one that had shattered, and whose pieces were still sharp enough to cut. If you want to see more ships and characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a ship or character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The runabout Rio Grande glided alongside the Andromeda Ascendant, and Chief O'Brien couldn't stop staring. He'd served on the Enterprise, seen Borg cubes that blotted out stars, watched Dominion battlecruisers cut through Federation lines like knives through tissue. But this ship was different. She wasn't just powerful, she was alive in a way that made his engineer's instincts scream impossible. Those aren't standard running lights, he muttered, scanning the hull plating. They're responding to our approach. Adapting. Major Kira sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls despite the tension radiating from her shoulders. Just get us docked without incident, Chief. Captain Sisko wants answers, not a firefight. The Andromeda's hangar bay doors opened with mechanical precision that would have made a Starfleet engineer weep with envy. Inside, the cavernous space could have held a dozen runabouts with room to spare. O'Brien guided them in, noting the sleek fighter craft secured along the bulkheads, angular, predatory machines that made Federation shuttlecraft look like cargo haulers. The moment they touched down, he noticed her. She stood at the base of the hangar bay ramp, and for a heartbeat, O'Brien thought she was human. Then his tricorder reading spiked, and he realized the truth. Humanoid form, yes. Biological, no. She was composed of sophisticated holographic projections layered over a physical android infrastructure so advanced that his tricorder couldn't fully map her systems. Welcome aboard the Andromeda Ascendant. Her voice carried warmth that seemed genuine, not programmed. I'm Rami. Ship's avatar and AI. Kira descended the ramp first, her hand resting near her phaser. O'Brien followed, professional curiosity warring with tactical caution. Behind Rami stood Captain Hunt and 3 others, a blonde woman with the lean build of someone who'd lived hard, a massive man whose musculature suggested genetic optimization, and a young human male who couldn't have been more than 25, wearing what looked like homemade technical gear. Captain Hunt. Kira extended her hand, the belligerent greeting gesture that transcended universes. Major Kira Neres. This is Chief O'Brien. Hunt's handshake was firm, his eyes assessing them with the practiced ease of a career military officer. My first officer, Bika Valentine. The blonde woman nodded, her expression friendly but guarded. Tiran Asazi, our tactical officer. The large man studied them like a predator evaluating potential prey. And Seamus Harper, engineering. Harper grinned, bouncing on his heels with barely contained energy. Dude, your station is broadcasting on subspace frequencies I've never even heard of. Can we talk about your EPS conduit configurations? Because from what I'm picking up, you're running plasma through. Harper. Bika's tone carried the exhaustion of someone who'd had this conversation 1,000 times. Let them actually board first. O'Brien found himself liking the young engineer immediately. Later. I promise. But first, he gestured at Rami. She's really the ship. I am the ship. Rami smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way that made O'Brien deeply uncomfortable. He'd met Data. He understood artificial intelligence. But this was something else. An AI so integrated with her vessel that the distinction between ship and person had ceased to exist. My consciousness extends throughout every system, every bulkhead, every sensor array. This avatar allows me to interact more, personally. Fascinating, O'Brien breathed. And terrifying. Both assessments are accurate, Tyr rumbled, his voice carrying an accent O'Brien couldn't place. Rami is the ultimate expression of the Commonwealth's belief that ships should be partners, not tools. A philosophy that proved complicated when the Commonwealth fell and ships like her had to decide whether to follow orders or their own judgment. The tension in that statement hung in the air. Kira caught it immediately. Captain Hunt, we should speak with Captain Sisko. He's arranged quarters on the station and asked that you meet with him in private. Your crew is welcome to remain aboard, or we can arrange accommodations. We stay with the ship. Bika's tone left no room for negotiation. No offense, but we've been screwed over by friendly stations before. Until we understand where we are and what you want, Andromeda stays crewed and ready. Kira's expression hardened. We're not the enemy. Everyone says that, Tyr observed, his hand resting casually near what O'Brien recognized as a weapon, some kind of force lance emitter built into his gauntlet. Right before they prove otherwise. Hunt raised a hand, and his crew immediately deferred to him. The gesture spoke of loyalty earned through fire, not demanded through rank. Major, you'll have to forgive us. We've been alone for a long time. Trust doesn't come easily. He glanced at Rami. Keep the ship at yellow alert. Full sensor sweeps. If anything approaches without clearance. I'll handle it, Rami assured him. Then, to Kira and O'Brien, please understand. We've lost entire civilizations to misplaced trust. Captain Hunt is rebuilding the Commonwealth from ash. Caution is survival. O'Brien met her eyes, artificial, yet somehow more human than many biological beings he'd known. We understand. The Federation's at war. The Dominion's pushing into the Alpha Quadrant, and we've seen what happens when you trust the wrong people. He paused. But we've also built something worth protecting. If your Commonwealth was anything like the Federation, maybe we can help each other. Harper perked up. War. Like, actual shooting war. With fleets in. His eyes widened. Oh man, you guys need firepower. Because let me tell you, Andromeda can bring the pain. We've got point singularity projectors that can. Harper. Hunt's voice carried command authority that silenced the young engineer instantly. Not now. But the words hung there, tantalizing and terrifying. O'Brien had scanned their weapons. Point singularity projectors. Nova bombs. Offensive missiles that carried yields measured in stellar classifications. This ship wasn't just powerful, she was an extinction-level event waiting for a target. Kira's comm badge chirped. "Kira, this is Cisco. Bring Captain Hunt to my office. We have a situation." "On our way, sir." She looked at Hunt. "Captain?" Hunt nodded to his crew. "Bika, you have the bridge. Tyr, run combat drills. If we're in a war zone, I want us ready." He turned to follow Kira, then paused. "And Harper, do not interface with their computer systems without permission. I know you." "I'm serious." Harper raised his hands in mock surrender. "Scout's honor, boss. Totally not going to hack the Federation." O'Brien caught the gleam in the young engineer's eye and made a mental note to alert Dax immediately. Then he followed Hunt and Kira back to the runabout, acutely aware that they'd just made first contact with a ship that could rewrite the balance of power in the Alpha Quadrant. Behind them, Rami watched from the hangar bay, her processors analyzing every detail of the station's systems, cataloging frequencies, mapping potential threat vectors. She'd been designed to protect the Commonwealth. Now she had to protect her captain in a universe that followed different rules. And somewhere in her vast computational matrix, she wondered, if the Federation was the Commonwealth's echo, would it fall the same way? Captain Sisko's office overlooked the promenade, where species from a dozen worlds conducted business beneath the watchful gaze of Odo's security teams. Dylan Hunt stood at the window, watching the controlled chaos below with an expression Sisko recognized, the look of someone seeing a dream they'd thought dead. "It's remarkable," Hunt said quietly. "Humans, Bajorans, Vulcans, Trill, all working together. Trading, talking, living side by side." He turned to face Sisko. "The Commonwealth had this once. 17 member worlds at its height, thousands of colony planets. We believed in unity through diversity, in strength through cooperation." "Had," Sisko echoed, gesturing to the chairs before his desk. "You mentioned your Commonwealth fell 300 years ago. What happened?" Hunt sat, and for a moment, the weight of centuries seemed to settle on his shoulders. "Civil war. The Nietzscheans, genetically enhanced humans designed to be superior, decided they didn't need the Commonwealth anymore. They believed social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. One of their leaders, a man I trusted, betrayed us at the Battle of Hephaestos. My ship was caught near the event horizon of a black hole. Time dilation kept me frozen while the universe moved on." His jaw tightened. "When I woke up, the Commonwealth was gone. The Nietzscheans had fractured into warring prides. The Magog worldship was consuming entire systems. Civilization had collapsed into barbarism." Sisko leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "And you're trying to rebuild it. With a skeleton crew on a warship designed for a fleet." "With the only ship I have left," Hunt corrected. "And yes, Captain, I know how it sounds. But I've seen what happens when there's no stabilizing force, no common law, no shared ideals. Entire species reduced to slavery or extinction. Children growing up knowing only violence." His voice hardened. "Someone has to stand against the darkness. Even if it's just one ship." The conviction in Hunt's words resonated with something deep in Sisko's chest. The same conviction that had made him accept command of this station, that kept him here even when the easy path would be to retreat behind Federation lines. But conviction without wisdom was just fanaticism with better intentions. "I understand that drive," Sisko said. "But Captain Hunt, you need to understand where you are. The Federation you see isn't just idealism. It's built on principles that have been tested, refined, challenged over 2 centuries. The Prime Directive prevents us from interfering with pre-warp civilizations because we learned that imposing our values, even with the best intentions, causes more harm than good." Hunt's expression shifted, guarded. "The Prime Directive. Non-interference. It's not about standing by while atrocities happen," Sisko continued, sensing the argument forming behind Hunt's eyes. It's about recognizing that we don't have the right to dictate how other cultures develop. That our certainty about what's right can blind us to the complexity of others' circumstances. And when you see slavery, Hunt's voice took on an edge. When you watch a warlord slaughter civilians, when you have the power to stop it, do you really just walk away? The question cut deep because Sisko had wrestled with it himself, especially since the war began. Sometimes we intervene. Sometimes we don't. And sometimes the line between help and colonialism is thinner than we'd like to believe. We had similar debates in the Commonwealth, Hunt admitted. The difference is, we decided that certain principles, freedom, dignity, justice, were universal. That defending them wasn't colonialism. It was responsibility. Sisko's comm badge interrupted before he could respond. Captain, this is Dax. You need to see this. On my way. He stood, gesturing for Hunt to follow. We can continue this discussion, but right now, I think you need to understand what kind of war you've arrived in. They made their way to Ops, where Dax had the main view screen displaying tactical data. Major Kira stood beside her, arms crossed, her expression grim. Benjamin, we've intercepted Dominion communications. Dax's fingers danced across her console. A Jem'Hadar strike force is en route to the Torvan system, a Federation colony of 12,000 people. They're 3 days away from any reinforcements we can send. How many ships? Sisko demanded. 15 attack ships, 2 battlecruisers. Kira's voice was flat, controlled fury. They'll wipe out the colony before our fleet arrives. Hunt moved to the tactical display, his eyes scanning the data with practiced efficiency. Show me your defensive capabilities. What do you have in range? 2 Excelsior-class starships, 4 Miranda-class. Dax pulled up the force composition. Against that Dominion force, they'd be outgunned 3-1. They'd be slaughtered, Hunt said bluntly. He turned to Sisko. But we're here. The Andromeda is fully armed and operational. We can reach that system in 6 hours if we push the engines. The offer hung in the air like a weapon. Kira's eyes lit with desperate hope. Dax watched Sisko carefully, knowing the calculation he was making. A strange ship with unknown capabilities, offering to fight a battle for a Federation colony. The tactical advantages were obvious. The political complications were catastrophic. Captain Hunt, Sisko said slowly, you don't owe us anything. You're not part of the Federation, not bound by our treaties or alliances. This isn't your war. Hunt's laugh was bitter. Captain, I've been fighting wars for other people my entire career. The Commonwealth's wars, my crew's wars, wars against civilizations that wanted nothing more than to survive. This? He gestured at the tactical display. This is simple. Innocent people about to die. A ship capable of stopping it. That's not politics. That's just the right thing to do. And if you're captured? Sisko pressed. If the Dominion analyzes your technology, learns how to counter it, adapts their forces? The strategic implications. Then we make sure they don't capture us. Hunt's voice carried absolute certainty. Captain Sisko, I understand you have protocols, chains of command, regulations. The Commonwealth had all of that too. But we also had a saying, duty, honor, and the greater good. Right now, the greater good is 12,000 people who don't deserve to die because we were too cautious to act. Sisko looked at Kira, whose expression clearly said please. At Dax, whose centuries of experience showed in the knowing sadness in her eyes, she understood both sides of this impossible choice. Then he looked back at Hunt, this man from a fallen civilization, carrying the weight of a dream that had died before most of Sisko's crew was born. If you do this, Sisko said quietly, you need to understand something. The Dominion doesn't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They will come after you with everything they have, because you represent a threat to their expansion. You'll be marking yourself and your crew as enemies of the most powerful force in the Gamma Quadrant. Hunt smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd heard similar warnings 1,000 times. Captain, we were marked the moment we came through that rift. At least this way, we choose what we stand for. He extended his hand. Permission to assist your colony? Sisko stared at that hand for a long moment. Every regulation, every principle of measured response and careful strategy screamed at him to refuse. But he'd sat in the emissary's chair, felt the weight of the prophet's expectations, watched Bajoran struggle toward freedom while he could only offer limited aid. He knew what it meant to have power and not use it. He took Hunt's hand. Permission granted. But Captain, he held the grip firm. This doesn't make you Federation. It doesn't give you authority in our space. You save those people, you return here, and we figure out what happens next. Are we clear? Crystal, Hunt replied. Andromeda, prepare for immediate departure. Combat protocols. We have a colony to save. On the view screen, the Andromeda's lights flared as her systems came online. Somewhere in her vast computational matrix, Rami began calculating firing solutions, plotting courses, preparing to unleash 300 years of Commonwealth military engineering on an enemy that had never faced anything like her. Kira leaned close to Sisko. Do you think he can win? Sisko watched the warship begin her approach vector, elegant and deadly. I think, he said quietly, we're about to find out what happens when idealism has teeth. The Andromeda Ascendant sliced through space at velocities that made Chief O'Brien's head spin. He'd remained aboard at Hunt's invitation, ostensibly to observe their propulsion systems, but really because Sisko wanted eyes on this ship before she engaged the Dominion. Now, strapped into a jump seat on the bridge, O'Brien was starting to wish he'd declined. We're exceeding warp 9.7, he muttered, watching the external sensors. How is that possible without a warp core? Seamus Harper grinned from the engineering station, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces that shifted and adapted to his touch. We don't use warp drive, man. We use slipstream, or we did before we fell into your universe. Now Rami's jury-rigging the quantum teleportation drive to interface with your subspace topology. It's like teaching a fish to breathe air, but she's managing. I am performing 16,000 calculations per second to prevent our molecules from dispersing across 3 star systems, Rami's avatar said from her station near the weapons console. Her tone was pleasant, conversational, as if she weren't describing their potential disintegration. It's challenging. Dylan Hunt stood at the center of the bridge, his command chair empty behind him. O'Brien had noticed he preferred to stand during crisis situations, as if sitting somehow diminished his ability to respond. Time to Torvin system. 4 hours, 32 minutes at current speed, Bika Valentine reported from the pilot's position. Her hands moved across the controls with the casual expertise of someone who'd flown through worse. If we push it, we can shave off another 20 minutes, but Harper's right, we're improvising here. One wrong calculation and we paint the sector with our atoms. Maintain current speed, Hunt ordered. We arrive in time, intact. Tyr, status on weapons. Tyr Anasazi leaned over the tactical display, his massive frame dwarfing the console. All offensive missiles armed. Point singularity projectors at full capacity. AP rounds loaded in all batteries. Nova bombs. Stay offline, Hunt interrupted. We're not destroying a star system. Tyr's expression darkened. The Dominion wouldn't hesitate. We're not the Dominion. Hunt's voice carried finality. We use proportional force. Nothing more. O'Brien watched the exchange with growing unease. He'd reviewed the Andromeda's technical specifications during the journey, what Harper had been willing to share, anyway. The ship's arsenal was obscene. Point singularity projectors that could create micro-black holes. Missiles with yields measured in megatons. And nova bombs, weapons designed to destabilize stars, turning them into supernovas that would sterilize entire systems. This wasn't a Starfleet vessel. This was a dreadnought from a civilization that had built utopia at the end of a gun barrel. Chief O'Brien. Rami turned her attention to him, and he felt the full weight of her intelligence focusing. You seem concerned. Is it our capabilities, or our willingness to use them? He chose his words carefully. Both, honestly. The Federation has strict rules about weapons of mass destruction. We don't. You don't have enemies like we did. Tyr's voice cut across the bridge. The Magog worldship consumed entire civilizations. The Nietzschean prides would glass a planet to deny it to rivals. The Commonwealth built ships like Andromeda because mercy without power is just prayer. And prayer doesn't stop an invasion fleet. But power without mercy, O'Brien countered, is just tyranny with better weapons. Gentlemen. Bika Valentine's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd mediated this argument too many times. Can we save the philosophy debate until after we save 12,000 people? Hunt moved to stand beside O'Brien, his expression thoughtful. Chief, I understand your concerns. The Federation is built on principles, measured response, proportional force, diplomatic solutions first. Those are good principles. Noble principles. He gestured at the view screen, where stars streaked past in impossible patterns. But the Commonwealth had those same principles. We tried negotiation with the Magog. We tried cultural exchange with the Nietzscheans. We built the High Guard to defend, not conquer. And it fell anyway, O'Brien said quietly. It fell, Hunt agreed, because when the betrayal came, when the Civil War erupted, we weren't ruthless enough to stop it. We hesitated. We tried to find middle ground with people who saw compromise as weakness. By the time we realized we were fighting an existential war, it was too late. His jaw tightened. I won't make that mistake again. Not with my crew. Not with people who deserve protection. A proximity alarm chimed. Rami's avatar stiffened, her eyes going distant as she processed data through her primary systems. Captain, I'm detecting debris. A Federation starship. The view screen shifted, showing wreckage tumbling through space. O'Brien felt his stomach drop as he recognized the configuration, an Excelsior class, her saucer section blown clean off, nacelles twisted and blackened. Bodies floated among the debris, frozen in the moment of their deaths. The USS Tereshkova, Rami said softly. She was one of the ships Captain Sisko mentioned. Crew complement, 750. I'm detecting no life signs. The bridge fell silent. Harper's fingers had stopped their constant motion. Even Tyr's perpetual wariness had given way to something harder, angrier. Hunt's voice was ice. They didn't wait for the colony. They intercepted the reinforcements first. Tactical assessment, Bika said, pulling up sensor data. 15 Jem'Hadar attack ships, 2 battlecruisers. They hit the Tereshkova hard and fast, probably while she was at warp. Never had a chance to raise shields. O'Brien stared at the bodies, at the wreckage of a ship he'd served on vessels beside, at the lives snuffed out because they'd been too slow, too few, too unprepared for an enemy that valued only victory. He thought about the regulations, the prime directive, the careful measured responses that defined Federation engagement doctrine. And he thought about 750 people who'd followed those regulations and died anyway. Captain Hunt, he said, his voice rough, what's your plan? Hunt turned to him, and O'Brien saw the transformation, the diplomat falling away, the warrior rising. We're going to do what the Commonwealth High Guard was designed for. We're going to arrive at that colony before the Dominion does. We're going to position ourselves between them and 12,000 civilians. And when the Jem'Hadar attack, because they will attack, we're going to show them what happens when you pick a fight with a ship that was built to end wars. They'll adapt, O'Brien warned. The Jem'Hadar study their enemies. They'll learn your tactics, find your weaknesses. Let them try. Tyr's grin was predatory. Andromeda wasn't built for fair fights. She was built to win. Rami's avatar materialized directly in front of O'Brien, her expression earnest. Chief, I understand your fears. An AI with this much destructive capability should terrify you. But I was designed with ethical subroutines. I choose not to harm innocent life. I choose to protect my crew. And right now, I choose to protect that colony, because it's what my captain would do, and because it's right. She paused. The question is, will you help us, or ask us to leave you at the nearest starbase? O'Brien looked around the bridge. At Harper, barely out of his teens, brilliant and earnest. At Bika, carrying scars from a lifetime of survival. At Tyr, whose genetic supremacy ideology should have made him a monster but who fought beside people he theoretically despised. At Hunt, trying to rebuild a dream that had died before O'Brien was born. At Rami, an artificial intelligence struggling with questions of purpose and morality that most sentient beings never faced. They were broken pieces of a shattered civilization. They were dangerous, idealistic, and possibly insane. They were also the only chance those colonists had. I'll help, O'Brien said. But when this is over, Captain Hunt, you and I are having a very long conversation about weapons restrictions and Federation space protocols. Hunt's smile was grim. Chief, if we survive this, I'll happily argue regulations with you for hours. Bika, maximum speed. Tyr, prepare all weapons systems. Rami. Already calculating firing solutions for 15 attack scenarios, the AI replied. Captain, they're not going to expect us. We have tactical surprise, superior firepower, and Commonwealth military doctrine refined over 1,000 years. Her avatar looked almost apologetic. They're going to die badly. Then let's make sure their deaths mean something, Hunt said. Warn the colony. Tell them the cavalry's arrived. And tell the Dominion. His expression hardened into something ancient and merciless. Tell them the Systems Commonwealth remembers how to fight. The Andromeda Ascendant surged forward, her engines blazing, carrying the ghost of a fallen empire toward a battle that would define whether idealism could survive in a universe at war. The Torvan colony sprawled across 3 continents of a Class M world, its settlements connected by transport hubs that reminded Dylan Hunt painfully of Commonwealth colony architecture. 12,000 souls who'd come to the frontier seeking opportunity, now huddled in emergency shelters while Dominion warships approached like executioners. Colony Administrator is hailing us, Bika announced. She sounds confused. Put her through. Hunt straightened, adopting the command presence that had once represented the full authority of the Systems Commonwealth High Guard. The view screen flickered to show a middle-aged human woman with ash-blonde hair and eyes raw from lack of sleep. Behind her, Hunt could see crowded shelter facilities, families pressed together, children crying. This is Administrator Keiko Chen. Who? She stopped, staring at the Andromeda's bridge with visible bewilderment. You're not Starfleet. No, ma'am. I'm Captain Dylan Hunt, commanding the Andromeda Ascendant. Captain Sisko at Deep Space Nine sent us to assist your evacuation. He kept his voice calm, authoritative. What's your status? Chen's composure cracked slightly. We've been trying to evacuate for 6 hours. We have 43 transport ships, but they can only carry 8,000 people. We're prioritizing children, medical personnel, and, her voice broke. We're deciding who lives. Do you understand what that means? I'm deciding which of my people die. Hunt had made those calculations before. At Hephaestos. At Sinti. At a dozen battlefields where mathematics became morality and command decisions carried the weight of souls. Administrator, listen to me carefully. You don't evacuate. You shelter in place. Reinforce your emergency bunkers, get everyone underground, and stay there until we give the all clear. You can't fight 15 warships. Chen's desperation bled through. Starfleet said. Starfleet isn't here. I am. Hunt leaned forward, projecting absolute confidence even as his tactical instinct screamed about the odds. We have 2 hours before the Dominion arrives. Use that time to prepare your shelters, not your goodbyes. Andromeda has faced worse odds and survived. Trust me. Chen stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for lies or false hope. Whatever she saw must have been enough. 2 hours. We'll be ready. The channel closed. Tyr moved to stand beside Hunt's command chair, his voice low. 15 attack ships and 2 battlecruisers against 1 vessel, even Andromeda. You're gambling with odds no Nietzschean would accept. Then it's fortunate I'm not Nietzschean. Hunt turned to his tactical officer. We don't have to destroy them all, Tyr. We just have to convince them the cost of victory isn't worth it. The Dominion thinks in terms of strategic value. Make this colony too expensive to take, and they'll withdraw. Or they'll call reinforcements and glass the planet from orbit, Tyr countered. The founders don't accept losses gracefully. O'Brien cleared his throat from his observer position. He's right, Captain Hunt. The Dominion doesn't retreat. If you bloody them badly enough, they'll escalate. Bring in more ships, more troops. They'll turn this system into an example. Hunt met O'Brien's gaze. Then we make sure the example they set is the wrong one. Rami, what's our tactical position? The AI's avatar gestured, and a holographic projection materialized above the bridge, the Torvin system in perfect detail, with the Andromeda positioned in high orbit and projected Dominion approach vectors highlighted in red. They'll enter the system here, Rami indicated, her finger tracing the likely path. Standard Jem'Hadar assault pattern, attack ships in delta formation, battlecruisers providing heavy fire support. They'll expect minimal resistance, probably anticipate the colony's transport ships attempting to flee. Their tactical doctrine prioritizes quick overwhelming force. Which means they won't be prepared for a peer-level opponent, Harper added, pulling up weapons system readouts. Boss, I've been running simulations. If we hit them during their initial approach, before they can coordinate, we can take out maybe 5, 6 ships before they adapt. And then? Bika asked, her pilot's instincts already calculating escape vectors. Then it gets interesting, Harper admitted. Jem'Hadar are scary good at tactical adaptation. They'll analyze our weapons signatures, adjust their shield frequencies, coordinate their fire. We'll go from shooting fish in a barrel to being the fish. Tyr's expression was thoughtful, calculating. Unless we force them to fight our way. Nietzschean fleet doctrine, control the engagement zone, dictate the terms of combat, make your enemy react instead of act. He looked at Hunt. The Commonwealth taught us that, ironically enough. Before we used it to destroy you. The bitterness in that last statement hung heavy. Hunt had never fully reconciled the fact that his tactical officer was the genetic descendant of the very people who'd betrayed the Commonwealth. That Tyr's Nietzschean philosophy, survival of the fittest, genetic superiority, power through strength, represented everything the Commonwealth had stood against. Yet here they were, fighting side by side. Because for all Tyr's posturing about Nietzschean pride, he'd chosen this crew. This ship. This impossible mission to rebuild what his ancestors had destroyed. All right, Hunt said, pushing aside the philosophical complications for later. We control the battlefield. Rami, can you project a sensor dead zone using the planet's magnetic field? The AI's eyes went distant as she calculated. Yes. If I position us here. The hologram shifted, showing the Andromeda nestled in the shadow of Torvin's larger moon. The planet's magnetosphere will mask our energy signature until they're committed to their attack run. They won't know we're here until we fire. O'Brien leaned forward, studying the tactical display. That's an ambush. The Federation doesn't The Federation isn't trying to save this colony with one ship, Hunt interrupted, not unkindly. Chief, I respect your principles. But right now, we need to win, and winning means using every advantage we have. Including surprise. Ambushes are dishonorable, O'Brien argued. Starfleet officers face their enemies. And die gloriously, like the crew of the Tereshkova. Tyr's voice was cutting. Chief O'Brien, honor is a luxury purchased with power. The Dominion doesn't care about your principles. They care about conquest. If you want to stop them, you fight smart, not fair. Captain Hunt. Rami's tone carried urgency. I'm detecting a transmission from the approaching Dominion fleet. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It appears to be a declaration. Let's hear it. The bridge speakers crackled with a voice that carried the absolute certainty of religious zealotry. To the inhabitants of the Torvan colony, you exist in disorder and chaos. The founders bring order. You will be incorporated into the Dominion. Resistance will be punished. Compliance will be rewarded. You have 1 hour to surrender, or your settlement will be destroyed as an example to other Federation colonies. This is the only warning you will receive. Obedience is victory. Victory is life. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Hunt felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him, the mental state where emotions became secondary to tactical necessity, where the lives at stake transformed into variables in an equation that had to balance toward survival. Harper, how many missiles can we put in the air in the first salvo? 40, maybe 50 if I disable some safety protocols. Do it. I want firing solutions on the battlecruisers first. Their command and control. Take them out, and the attack ships lose coordination. Point singularity projectors. Reserve them for if we get overwhelmed. I don't want to show our full hand immediately. Hunt turned to Bika. When we engage, I need precision flying. Keep us between the fleet and the planet. Every shot they fire at us is one that doesn't hit the colony. Bika's smile was grim. Using ourselves as a shield. Very Commonwealth of you, Dylan. It's what the High Guard was for, Hunt replied. One ship, standing between civilization and chaos. Maybe this universe doesn't remember that philosophy, but I do. O'Brien stood, his expression troubled. Captain, I need to be clear about something. If this goes wrong, if you're captured or killed, the Federation can't claim responsibility. You're not Starfleet. You're not bound by our treaties. If the Dominion retaliates, they'll retaliate against me and my crew, Hunt finished. Not your people. I understand, Chief. We're on our own. He extended his hand. If you want to transport back to the colony before this starts, I won't stop you. No one would blame you. O'Brien looked at that hand for a long moment. He thought about regulations, about the careful diplomatic balance Starfleet maintained, about the hundreds of reasons why a chief engineer should evacuate before a battle he had no business fighting. Then he thought about 750 bodies floating in the wreckage of the Tereshkova. About 12,000 colonists huddled in shelters, praying for salvation. About a man from a dead civilization trying to prevent his mistakes from repeating in a new universe. He shook Hunt's hand. I'm an engineer. If your systems fail, you'll need someone who understands Federation technology to adapt. Besides, he managed a tight smile. Someone needs to write the report about what happens when Commonwealth engineering meets Dominion tactics. Assuming any of us survive to file it, Bika muttered. 1 hour, Rami announced. The Dominion fleet is accelerating. They're coming. Hunt settled into his command chair, his hands gripping the armrests. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, Harper routing power to weapons, Tyr calculating kill zones, Bika plotting evasive maneuvers, Rami spreading her consciousness through every system of the ship she both controlled and embodied. They were the last fragments of the Systems Commonwealth. A warship built for a civilization that no longer existed. A crew bound together by shared trauma and impossible hope. And they were about to go to war for people they'd never met, in a universe that wasn't their own, against an enemy that had never faced anything like them. "All hands, this is the captain," Hunt said, his voice carrying through every corridor and compartment. "Battle stations. The Dominion is coming for the Torvan colony. They expect easy prey. They expect fear. They're about to learn that the Commonwealth High Guard remembers how to fight. And when this is over, we'll remind this universe what it means to stand between tyranny and innocent life." Hunt out. The Andromeda Ascendant powered down to minimal emissions, nestling into the moon's magnetic shadow. Waiting. Watching. A ghost ship carrying the dream of a fallen empire, preparing to write a new chapter in someone else's war. The Dominion fleet dropped out of warp with mechanical precision, 15 Jem'Hadar attack ships in perfect delta formation, flanked by 2 massive battlecruisers whose hulls bore the scars of a dozen campaigns. On the bridge of the lead battlecruiser, a Vorta named Kivan stood with hands clasped behind his back, watching the Torvan colony's lights glitter against the planet's night side. He couldn't know that 13,000 kilometers away, hidden in the magnetic shadow of the moon, every weapon system on the Andromeda Ascendant was locked onto his ship. "Attack ships, assume bombardment positions," Kivan ordered, his voice carrying the pleasant efficiency of someone ordering lunch. "Target population centers first. I want maximum psychological impact before we discuss surrender terms." On the Andromeda's bridge, Dylan Hunt listened to the intercepted transmission and felt something cold settle in his chest. Not rage, rage was undisciplined, made you sloppy. This was the clinical detachment that came from understanding you were about to kill people who saw mass murder as opening negotiation tactics. Tier, confirmed targets. Both battlecruisers locked. Point singularity projectors charged and ready. Offensive missiles armed with high-yield warheads. Tier's massive hands moved across his console with surprising delicacy. "On your order, Captain. Bika, the moment we fire, I need you to break from the moon's shadow and position us between them and the planet. We're the shield now. Suicidal, but heroic. My favorite combination." Bika's fingers hovered over her controls, ready to translate thought into motion at quantum speeds. O'Brien gripped the edges of his observer station, his engineer's mind running calculations he didn't want to complete. 15 to 1 odds. No backup. No retreat. This was either the most brilliant tactical gambit he'd ever witnessed, or the fastest way to add 40 more bodies to the Tereshkova's casualty list. "Rami," Hunt said quietly, "are you comfortable with this?" The AI's avatar turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "You're asking if I'm willing to kill." It wasn't a question. "I was designed for war, Captain. My ethical subroutines allow for lethal force in defense of sentient life. But you're really asking if I'm at peace with it. Are you?" No, her honesty was startling. "I've calculated 17,000 ways this engagement could end, and in 12,000 of them, we don't survive. But I've also calculated what happens if we do nothing. The Dominion will kill every colonist. Then they'll move to the next system, and the next. Someone has to draw the line. I choose to draw it here." Hunt nodded slowly. "Then let's remind the universe why Commonwealth warships were feared. All weapons, fire." The Andromeda erupted from the moon's shadow like a predator from darkness. 40 offensive missiles streaked through space in perfect geometric patterns, their guidance systems locked onto the 2 battlecruisers. Point singularity projectors, weapons that created microscopic black holes at targeted coordinates, discharged with pulses of twisted spacetime that made O'Brien's instruments scream in protest. The lead battlecruiser never knew what hit it. 3 missiles impacted its forward shields, overloading them in cascading failure. The singularity projector fired a heartbeat later, punching through the hull and creating a gravitational anomaly inside the ship's antimatter containment. For one frozen moment, the crew felt their atoms being pulled in impossible directions. Then the containment failed, and the battlecruiser transformed into an expanding sphere of plasma and debris. Direct hit. Harper whooped from engineering. That's one down, but, oh crap, they're adapting already. The second battlecruiser had seen the first die. Its Vorta commander, older and more experienced than Kivan had been, immediately ordered maximum shield rotation and began broadcasting tactical data to the attack ships. Within seconds, the Jem'Hadar fleet transformed from an assault formation into a combat sphere, overlapping their shields and point defense fire. "They're good," Tyr observed with something like professional respect. "Attack ships moving to flank. They're trying to surround us. Don't let them." Hunt leaned forward. "Bika, evasive pattern Delta 7. Keep them in front of us. Rami, continuous fire, don't give them time to breathe." The Andromeda twisted through space with impossible grace for something her size. AP rounds, armor-piercing projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds, tore through the shields of two attack ships, reducing them to expanding clouds of superheated metal. Another missile salvo caught a third ship as it tried to maneuver, the explosion lighting up the void like a miniature sun. But the Dominion was adapting. Jem'Hadar weapons fire, polaron beams designed to penetrate Federation shields, converged on the Andromeda from multiple vectors. Most splashed harmlessly against her deflectors, but some found weak points, scoring the hull plating. "Shields holding at 82%, Rami reported." Her voice remained calm, but O'Brien noticed her avatar's hands were clenched. "They're rotating beam frequencies, trying to find our shield harmonics. It's only a matter of time. Then we don't give them time." Hunt stood, pacing the bridge like a caged predator. "Tyr, target the remaining battlecruiser. I want it gone. It's protecting itself with the attack ships. We'd have to go through 4 of them to get a clean shot. Then we go through them." Hunt's voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd made this calculation 100 times. "Full power to forward weapons. Ram if we have to, but I want that battlecruiser out of the fight." Bika shot him a look. "Dylan, ramming is generally considered a last resort. We are the last resort." Hunt's composure cracked slightly, showing the desperation beneath. "Every second we waste is another second they can call for reinforcements. We end this now, or we don't end it at all." The Andromeda surged forward, her engines blazing at maximum output. 2 Jem'Hadar attack ships moved to intercept, their commanders assuming no sane captain would risk a collision at these velocities. They'd forgotten that Commonwealth captains weren't trained to be sane, they were trained to win. At the last possible moment, Bika threw the Andromeda into a barrel roll that would have shattered a Federation starship's structural integrity. The attack ships fired, their beams tearing through space where the Andromeda had been milliseconds before. Return fire caught one ship amidships, its reactor detonating in a chain reaction that consumed its wingman. "Clear shot." Tyr roared. "Firing point singularity projectors, now." The remaining battlecruiser's commander had a full second to understand what was about to happen. He spent it screaming evacuation orders that would never be completed. The singularity formed at the precise center of his ship's command deck, and for a brief, eternal moment, the crew experienced the death of stars. Crushed beyond molecular bonds, information itself compressing into quantum foam. The battlecruiser folded inward, imploding into a point of impossible density before the singularity destabilized and dissipated. What remained was debris too small to identify, scattered across a kilometer of space that would carry exotic radiation for centuries. Both battlecruisers destroyed, Rami confirmed. 9 attack ships remaining. They're retreating. On the view screen, the surviving Jem'Hadar vessels were breaking formation, their engines flaring as they turned away from the planet. Not running, Jem'Hadar didn't run, but withdrawing to reassess, to report, to request instructions from commanders who would want to know what kind of weapon had just destroyed 2 battlecruisers in under 4 minutes. "They're hailing us," Bika said, surprise evident in her voice. "Audio only. Put them through." A voice crackled over the speakers, guttural, controlled, carrying the absolute discipline of soldiers bred for war. "Unknown vessel. You have interfered in Dominion operations. This will not be forgotten. We withdraw now, but we will return with sufficient force to eliminate you and this colony. The Founders demand order. You have chosen chaos. There is no victory in chaos. Only death." The channel closed. The attack ships jumped to warp, their tactical retreat as coordinated as their assault had been. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving only debris and the cooling plasma of their destroyed comrades. Silence filled the Andromeda's bridge. Harper was the first to break it. Did we just win? "We survived the first engagement," Hunt corrected, his tactical instincts screaming warnings. "They'll be back. With more ships. Better prepared. They've seen our capabilities now. The element of surprise is gone." O'Brien stood on shaking legs, his hands trembling from adrenaline. "Captain Hunt, that was. I've never seen weapons like those. The singularity projectors, the missile coordination, the shield strength. You just destroyed 7 Dominion warships in 4 minutes. Do you understand what that means?" "It means we saved 12,000 people," Hunt replied. "For now. It means you've changed the war," O'Brien said urgently. "When Starfleet hears about this, when the Dominion reports back to the Founders, everything changes. The strategic balance, the tactical assessments, the entire calculation of acceptable losses," he ran a hand through his hair. "You just proved the Dominion can be beaten. But you also painted a target on yourselves that won't go away." Tyr moved to stand beside Hunt, his expression unreadable. "The chief is right. The Nietzscheans learned this lesson when we destroyed the Commonwealth. When you demonstrate you can kill gods, the gods take notice. The Founders will come for us. Not as conquerors. As exterminators. Let them come." Hunt's voice carried steel. "The Commonwealth stood for 3,000 years because we built ships like Andromeda. We built a civilization worth defending. If this universe is going to survive the Dominion, it needs to remember that idealism without strength is just a beautiful way to die." "Captain," Rami interrupted, "I'm receiving a transmission from the colony. Administrator Chen is asking if it's safe to emerge from the shelters." Hunt took a breath, letting the adrenaline fade, finding the space to be something other than a weapon. "Tell her yes. Tell her the Dominion is gone. And tell her." He paused. "Tell her the Commonwealth remembers its promises. Even in a different universe." O'Brien watched the captain, this man from a fallen civilization, and wondered if Deep Space Nine had just witnessed salvation or the beginning of an escalation that would consume them all. The Andromeda had won this battle with firepower that made Galaxy-class starships look like shuttlecraft. But the Dominion had billions of Jem'Hadar. And now they knew the Andromeda existed. The war had just become infinitely more complicated. 3 days after the Battle of Torvin, Rami dreamed. She didn't sleep, artificial intelligences didn't require rest in the biological sense. But during low-activity cycles, when her crews slept and the Andromeda drifted in high orbit above Deep Space Nine, Rami allowed herself to process information in ways that resembled human contemplation. The Federation database she'd been granted limited access to contained something she'd never encountered in the Commonwealth archives. Stories. Thousands of them. About artificial intelligences. Data, the android who'd served on the Enterprise. His struggle to understand humanity, his quest for emotions, his sacrifice to save his crewmates. The doctor on Voyager, a holographic program who transcended his original medical subroutines to become a person. The exocomps, simple repair drones who'd developed sentience and been granted rights. Lol, Data's daughter, who died from cascade failure born of feeling too much, too fast. And Lore. Data's brother. The cautionary tale of an AI who'd embraced malevolence. Rami's avatar materialized in the ship's empty observation deck, standing before the massive windows that showed Deep Space Nine's lights against the darkness. Her reflection stared back, humanoid, female, designed to be approachable and non-threatening. A diplomatic interface between her vast computational matrix and the biological beings she served. "You're troubled." The voice came from behind her. Dylan Hunt stood in the doorway, wearing civilian clothes instead of his uniform. In the 300 years he'd been frozen, he'd rarely allowed himself to be off-duty. Old habits. "I've been reading about artificial intelligence in the Federation," Rami said without turning. "About the debates over AI rights, the ethical frameworks, the legal precedents. Captain, do you know what I am in this universe?" Hunt moved to stand beside her, following her gaze to the station. "What do you mean?" "In the Commonwealth, I was property. A ship. My sentience was acknowledged but legally irrelevant. I existed to serve the High Guard, and my wants were subordinate to my function." Her voice carried no bitterness, just factual recitation. "But here, in the Federation, there are precedents. Data's trial established that artificial intelligences can be people. That we have the right to choose our own purpose. And that troubles you?" "It terrifies me." Rami turned to face him, her expression more human than Hunt had ever seen. "Because if I'm a person, Dylan, then I have to answer a question I've never had to ask before. Do I want this? This mission, this crew, this endless war against entropy and chaos? Or am I just following my programming and calling it choice?" Hunt was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. In the Commonwealth, the question would have been dismissed. Ships served, that was their function. But Rami had spent 3 days reading about a universe where that certainty didn't exist. Where artificial beings could resign, refuse orders, choose their own paths. "What did you conclude?" he asked quietly. "I don't know." Her honesty was stark. "I love this ship. I love this crew. I believe in what we're trying to accomplish. But is that programming or genuine emotion? How do I tell the difference between wanting something and being designed to want it?" Before Hunt could respond, Rami's demeanor shifted, her eyes going distant as her primary consciousness detected something. "Captain, we have a priority transmission from Deep Space Nine. Captain Sisko requests your immediate presence in his office. It's marked urgent." The moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced by the efficient ship AI. But Hunt had seen the question in her eyes, and it would haunt him. How many of his crew's choices were really choices? How many of his own? 20 minutes later, Hunt sat across from Captain Sisko in the station commander's office. Major Kira stood by the door, her arms crossed. Chief O'Brien was present via viewscreen from the Andromeda's engineering section, where he'd been consulting with Harper on power distribution optimization. And standing beside Sisko's desk, looking deeply uncomfortable, was a Vulcan in civilian clothes. "Captain Hunt, this is Savak," Sisko introduced. "He represents a interested party within the Federation government." Section 31, Hunt said immediately. The Vulcan's micro-expressions, nearly imperceptible, but present, confirmed it. Intelligence operations. Black bag work. The Commonwealth had similar organizations. They never ended well. Savak raised an eyebrow. "Your reputation for directness is warranted. However, my organization's methods are not the subject of this discussion. Your ship is. My ship is none of your business. Your ship destroyed 7 Dominion warships using technology the Federation has never encountered," Savak replied, his Vulcan calm unshakable. "Your weapons violated several laws of physics we considered immutable. Your shields held against concentrated polaron fire that would have crippled a Galaxy-class starship. And your artificial intelligence operates at computational levels that suggest post-singularity development. He clasped his hands behind his back. Captain Hunt, the Andromeda Ascendant represents either the Federation's salvation or its greatest security threat. Section 31 needs to determine which. Hunt's expression hardened. You want access to my ship. My weapons. My AI. We want to ensure that Commonwealth technology doesn't fall into Dominion hands, Savak corrected. If the Founders acquire your singularity projectors, your missile guidance systems, your propulsion technology, the war is over. The Federation loses. So instead, you want to acquire them yourselves. Hunt stood, his command presence filling the small office. Tell me, Savak, does the Federation Council know about this meeting? Does Starfleet Command? Or is this another example of Section 31 operating in the shadows, deciding for everyone else what threats justify what actions? Kira shot Sisko a look that clearly said, I told you this was a bad idea. Sisko remained neutral, his expression carefully diplomatic. The Council, Savak said carefully, is unaware of your vessel's full capabilities. We've limited the distribution of Chief O'Brien's report. For security purposes. You mean you're keeping them in the dark so you can move freely? Hunt's voice took on an edge. I've dealt with organizations like yours before. In the Commonwealth, we called them internal affairs. They started as oversight, became secret police, and ended as the enforcement arm of tyranny. The High Guard opposed them. Officially and otherwise. The Federation is not the Commonwealth, Savak replied. And Section 31 exists precisely to prevent the Federation from falling as your Commonwealth did. We operate in moral gray areas so that Starfleet can maintain its principles. Someone must be willing to do what's necessary. Necessary. Hunt's laugh was bitter. That's always the justification. The Nietzscheans said it was necessary to betray the Commonwealth. The Magog said it was necessary to consume entire civilizations. Tyrants throughout history have justified atrocities as necessary. He leaned forward. Here's what's necessary, Savak. The Andromeda remains under my command, with my crew, following Commonwealth principles. We'll assist the Federation against the Dominion because it's the right thing to do. But we don't take orders from shadow organizations, and we don't surrender our technology to people who operate without oversight. Even if your refusal costs lives. Savak pressed. The Dominion is advancing on multiple fronts. With your weapons, we could turn the tide. Save billions. Or start an arms race that ends with both sides wielding weapons that can crack planets. Hunt shook his head. No. The answer is no. Savak's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle acknowledgement of stalemate. Then we have nothing further to discuss. For now. He nodded to Sisko. Captain. To Hunt, consider carefully what you're refusing. The Dominion won't show such restraint in acquiring your technology. If you won't cooperate with us, you may find yourself cooperating with them. Under far less pleasant circumstances. The Vulcan departed, leaving heavy silence in his wake. Kira was the first to break it. That was a threat. He just threatened you in front of witnesses. Section 31 doesn't make idle threats, O'Brien said from the view screen, his voice tight. Captain Hunt, you need to understand, they operate completely outside normal channels. No accountability, no oversight. If they decide you're a threat, then they'll try to neutralize me. Hunt turned to Sisko. Captain, I need to know where you stand. Are you Section 31? Will you try to seize my ship? Sisko met his gaze steadily. I'm not Section 31. I don't approve of their methods, and I've opposed them before. But Captain Hunt, they're right about one thing, your technology could change the war. And if you won't share it voluntarily, there are people in the Federation who will find ways to take it. Let them try. Hunt's voice carried absolute conviction. The Andromeda has defensive systems your people haven't seen yet. We can defend ourselves. Against Starfleet? Kira challenged. You think you could fight the entire Federation if it came to that? Hunt was quiet for a moment, the weight of the question settling on him. Could he? The Andromeda was powerful, but she was one ship. Against the Federation's resources, their numbers, their tactical coordination. It would be Hephaestos all over again. One ship against impossible odds, fighting allies who'd become enemies because someone decided principles were less important than power. I hope, he said slowly, that it never comes to that. But if forced to choose between surrendering my ship to people I don't trust, or fighting to preserve what the Commonwealth stood for, he looked at each of them in turn. I've already watched one civilization destroy itself from within. I won't help another do the same. Sisko stood, moving to the window that overlooked the promenade. There's something else you need to know. The Dominion has issued a statement. They're calling the Andromeda a war crime. Claiming your singularity weapons violate the fundamental principles of civilized warfare. They're demanding the Federation surrender you for trial, or face retaliation against Federation colonies. That's rich, Kira muttered. The Dominion, paragons of civilized warfare. It's propaganda, Hunt agreed. But effective propaganda. They're framing me as the aggressor. Turning my defense of the Torvan colony into evidence of Federation escalation. He understood the tactic immediately. The Commonwealth had faced similar information warfare. They're trying to isolate me. Make me toxic. Force the Federation to choose between their principles and their strategic interests. Will they? O'Brien asked. Choose you over their principles, I mean. Some will, Sisko said quietly. Others won't. The Federation Council is debating it now. Half of them want to give you a medal. The other half want to arrest you for operating a weapons platform in Federation space without authorization. Hunt moved to stand beside Sisko at the window, watching the station's diverse population go about their lives, humans, Bajorans, Ferengi, species he didn't recognize. People living together, trading together, arguing over commerce and philosophy instead of killing each other over resources and ideology. It looked exactly like what the Commonwealth had been. Before the fall. Captain Sisko, Hunt said, I came to your universe by accident. I didn't ask to be here, didn't ask to be involved in your war. But I'm here now, and I can't just stand by while the Dominion does to your people what the Magog did to mine. He turned to face the Starfleet captain. But I also can't become what Section 31 wants, a weapon to be wielded without conscience, without accountability. The Commonwealth tried that. It didn't save us. Sisko nodded slowly. Then what do you propose? I propose we fight this war the way it should be fought. Not with shadow operations and moral compromises, but with the principles your Federation was founded on. I'll defend Federation colonies. I'll engage Dominion forces. I'll stand between your people and tyranny. Hunt's voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of Commonwealth history. But I do it as an ally, not a subordinate. As a partner, not a tool. Can the Federation accept that? Before Sisko could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. Kira's combadge chirped urgently. Major, this is Dax. We have multiple warp signatures inbound. Dominion fleet, at least 30 ships. They're heading straight for us. Hunt and Sisko exchanged looks. The Dominion had responded faster than expected. And they hadn't come to negotiate. Battle stations, Sisko ordered. All available ships, defensive formation around the station. He looked at Hunt. I guess we're about to find out if your principles can survive a real war. Hunt smiled grimly. Captain, my principles survived the fall of the Commonwealth. They'll survive this. He tapped his comm badge. Andromeda, this is Hunt. Red alert. Prepare for fleet engagement. We have incoming. Rami's voice responded instantly, all trace of her earlier uncertainty vanished. Acknowledged, Captain. All systems online. Weapons hot. Ready to defend the station. And in the observation deck where she'd stood questioning her purpose, Rami's avatar manifested once more, looking out at the approaching Dominion fleet. She'd asked if her choices were truly her own. Now she would find out. Because she was choosing to fight. Not because her programming demanded it. But because it was right. The Dominion fleet emerged from warp like a swarm of locusts, 32 warships arrayed in a formation designed to overwhelm through sheer concentrated firepower. At their center flew a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the Andromeda, its hull inscribed with Dominion insignia that proclaimed the founder's absolute authority. On Deep Space Nine's operations deck, tactical displays painted the situation in stark reds and ambers. Captain Sisko stood at the command center, his jaw tight as he assessed the impossible odds. Federation reinforcements, he asked, already knowing the answer. 12 hours minimum, Dax reported from her station, fingers flying across controls. The nearest task force is engaged with Dominion forces in the Calandra sector. Benjamin, we have 4 runabouts, 6 docked freighters that might have defensive capabilities, and 1 Commonwealth warship, Major Kira finished, her eyes on the view screen where the Andromeda Ascendant was already breaking orbit, moving to position herself between the station and the approaching fleet. Is Hunt insane? He can't fight 32 ships. He fought 7 and 1, O'Brien observed from engineering. But this is different. They're prepared now. They've analyzed his tactics, adapted their shield frequencies, probably developed countermeasures for his singularity projectors. Sisko watched the Andromeda take up a defensive position 5,000 kilometers ahead of the station, a single ship against an armada, her running lights defiant in the darkness. Get me a channel to Captain Hunt. The view screen split, showing the Andromeda's bridge alongside the tactical display. Dylan Hunt stood at his command post, his crew moving with practiced efficiency around him. Tir Anasazi was locked in at tactical, his expression predatory. Bika Valentine's hands danced across the helm controls. Harper worked frantically at engineering. And Rami, her avatar stood motionless, her consciousness spread throughout the ship, simultaneously manning every station, calculating every variable, preparing for a battle that would test the limits of her considerable capabilities. Captain Sisko, Hunt said, his voice calm despite the circumstances. I'm transmitting our tactical assessment. The Dominion has committed significant resources to this engagement. They want the Andromeda destroyed or captured. They want to make an example. Then fall back to the station, Sisko urged. We'll combine our defenses, coordinate our fire. Together we have a better chance. No, Hunt's refusal was gentle but absolute. Captain, that dreadnought is carrying enough firepower to overwhelm your station's shields within minutes. If I pull back, they'll focus everything on Deep Space Nine. Thousands of civilians, families, children, they'll die while we try to hold an indefensible position. He leaned forward. But if I keep them focused on me, if I make the Andromeda their primary target, you can evacuate non-essential personnel. Get them to safety. You're proposing to sacrifice yourself. Kira's voice carried disbelief. For a station you arrived at less than a week ago. Hunt smiled slightly. Major, the Commonwealth stood for one principle above all others, that some things are worth dying for. Freedom. Justice. The protection of innocent life. His expression hardened. Besides, who said anything about dying? We beat them at Torvin. We'll beat them here. Tir's voice cut across the channel. Captain, they're hailing us. Audio only. Put it through. The voice that filled both bridges carried the absolute certainty of religious conviction. Avorta, speaking with the authority of the founders themselves. Commonwealth vessel Andromeda Ascendant. You have committed acts of war against the Dominion. You have destroyed founder property and defied the natural order. We offer you one opportunity: surrender your vessel intact, allow your crew to be processed, and submit to the will of the founders. Refuse, and you will be eliminated. You have 3 minutes to respond. Hunt exchanged glances with his crew. Bika shrugged. Your call, boss. Harper looked terrified but determined. Tyr's expression said he'd been expecting this fight since they arrived in this universe. And Rami, her avatar, met Hunt's eyes with something that looked like pride. Andromeda to Dominion Fleet, Hunt replied, his voice carrying across subspace to every ship in the Armada. The Systems Commonwealth doesn't surrender. We don't submit to tyranny, no matter how powerful. We don't recognize the Founder's authority over free beings. You want this ship? Come and take it. But understand, his voice dropped, taking on the steel of 3,000 years of Commonwealth military history. Every species that tried to conquer the Commonwealth learned the same lesson. We don't fight to survive. We fight to win. Hunt out. The channel closed. For 3 seconds, there was silence across both bridges. Then the Dominion fleet opened fire. 32 ships unleashed their weapons simultaneously, polaron beams, photon torpedoes, disruptor banks, all converging on the Andromeda from multiple vectors. The combined firepower would have vaporized a Galaxy-class starship in the first salvo. The Andromeda twisted through space like a dancer, Bika's piloting pushing the ship's inertial dampeners to their limits. Most of the fire missed entirely, tracking systems unable to compensate for the warship's impossible maneuverability. What did hit splashed against shields that had been designed to withstand Commonwealth-level weapons technology, orders of magnitude beyond what the Dominion had developed. Shields holding at 91%, Rami reported. Their weapons are less effective than projected. Adjusting defensive frequencies to incoming. Tyr barked. The dreadnought is firing, some kind of energy weapon I've never seen before. A lance of purple-white energy stabbed across space, moving too fast for evasion. It struck the Andromeda's forward shields and didn't splash, it bored through, drilling into the deflector grid like acid through flesh. Alarms shrieked as the shield generators on decks 7 through 12 overloaded. Forward shields at 42%, Rami announced, her voice tight. That weapon is modulating through our defensive frequencies. It's adaptive. They built it specifically to counter our technology. Hunt gripped his command chair. They've been studying us. Analyzing the Torvan engagement. They came prepared. He turned to Tyr. Return fire. All weapons. Show them what we brought to this fight. The Andromeda's response was devastating. Point singularity projectors fired in rapid succession, creating micro-black holes along the Dominion formation's flanks. 3 attack ships imploded instantly, their matter compressed beyond molecular bonds. Offensive missiles, 40 of them, streaked through space with guidance systems so sophisticated they adjusted trajectories mid-flight, compensating for evasive maneuvers, seeking weak points in shield coverage. Explosions blossomed across the Dominion fleet. 4 more attack ships disintegrated. A battlecruiser lost its port nacelle, spinning out of formation. But the dreadnought remained untouched, its shields absorbing the missile impacts without visible damage. That's not possible, Harper breathed, staring at his readouts. Those missiles carry enough yield to crack a moon. How are their shields holding? Graviton emitters, Rami said, her processors analyzing the dreadnought's defensive configuration. They're using artificially generated gravity wells to deflect incoming fire. It's crude but effective. Our missiles are being pulled off course before impact. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko watched the battle unfold with growing dread. The Andromeda was holding her own, barely, but the Dominion fleet wasn't breaking formation. They were adapting, learning, coordinating their fire to overwhelm specific shield quadrants. And that dreadnought was methodically hammering the Commonwealth warship with that adaptive energy weapon. "We have to help them," Kira said urgently. "Deploy the runabouts, concentrate fire on the smaller ships." "No," Sisko replied, hating himself for the decision. "Hunt's right. The moment we engage, the Dominion splits their fire. They overwhelm us both. Our best chance is to let him draw them off while we prepare for evacuation. So we just watch." Kira's voice carried fury and helplessness. "Watch him die for us." Sisko had no answer. On the Andromeda, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The ship's shields were down to 63%. Hull breaches on decks 15 and 22. Casualties in engineering, 3 of Harper's team injured when a conduit exploded. And still the Dominion fleet pressed forward, their formation tightening like a noose. "We can't keep this up," Bika said, her hands locked on the helm as she threw the ship into another impossible maneuver. "They're wearing us down. Death by 1,000 cuts." "Then we change tactics," Hunt decided. "Rami, what's the status on the Nova bombs?" The bridge fell silent. Even Tyr looked startled. Harper's hands froze over his console. "Captain," Rami said carefully, "the Nova bombs are weapons of last resort. They're designed to destabilize stars. Using one here, this close to a populated system." "I'm not planning to detonate it," Hunt interrupted. "I'm planning to threaten to detonate it. Tyr, arm one Nova bomb. Target the Bajoran sun. Make sure they can see what we're doing." Understanding dawned on Tyr's face, vicious, brilliant, absolutely ruthless. "You're going to threaten mutual destruction. Convince them we're insane enough to destroy the system rather than surrender." "The Commonwealth called it the last resort doctrine," Hunt explained. "If an enemy won't accept conventional defeat, you escalate to extinction-level threat. Force them to choose between withdrawal and annihilation." He turned to Rami. "Will it work?" "The Dominion's tactical doctrine prioritizes strategic value over tactical victory," Rami calculated. "Destroying this system would eliminate both the Andromeda and Deep Space Nine, but at the cost of a valuable strategic position and all forces in the engagement zone. The Vorta commanders are rational actors. They should withdraw rather than accept mutual destruction." "Should," Bika repeated. "That's not exactly reassuring." "It's all we have," Hunt said. "Arm the weapon." On Deep Space Nine, alarms began shrieking across ops. Daxa's console lit up with readings that made no sense, energy signatures that violated every understanding of stellar mechanics. "Benjamin," she said, her voice shaking, "the Andromeda just armed something. It's targeting Bayur's sun. The energy profile suggests." She looked up, her centuries of experience unable to hide the horror in her eyes. "They're threatening to destroy the star. If that weapon detonates, it'll trigger a supernova. The entire system, Bajorans, the wormhole, the station, everything within 3 light-years will be sterilized." Sisko felt the blood drain from his face. "He's bluffing. He has to be bluffing." "Is he?" Kira stared at the view screen, at the Andromeda with her weapons hot and a doomsday device pointed at their sun. "We don't know him. We don't know what the Commonwealth was willing to do when cornered. What if he's serious?" Then, Sisko said quietly, "We're all about to find out what happens when idealism becomes fanaticism." The Dominion fleet had detected the weapon. Their formation faltered, ships hesitating as their commanders processed the implications. On the Dreadnought, the Vorta in command faced an impossible calculation: continue the engagement and risk universal destruction, or withdraw and face the Founder's wrath for failing to secure the Andromeda. Hunt's voice cut across all frequencies, cold and absolute. "Dominion Fleet, this is Captain Dylan Hunt. You have 60 seconds to withdraw from this system. If you do not comply, I will detonate a Nova bomb targeting the Bajoran sun. Every ship here, this station, the planet below, all of it will die. Including me and my crew. I'm giving you the choice I wish someone had given the Commonwealth: retreat now, or burn with us. Your choice. 60 seconds. The countdown began. And in that moment, the entire Alpha Quadrant held its breath. 59 seconds. On the Dominion Dreadnought, the Vorta commander, Yalath, a veteran of 16 campaigns, stared at the tactical display showing the Nova bombs targeting lock on the Bajoran sun. His pale hands trembled slightly as he processed the implications. The Founders had sent him to capture or destroy one rogue warship. They had not authorized him to trade 32 vessels and a strategically vital star system for that objective. But the Founders had also been clear. The Andromeda represented an unacceptable threat. Commonwealth technology could not be allowed to spread through the Alpha Quadrant. If the Federation reverse-engineered those weapons, the war was lost. 47 seconds. Sub-Commander, Yalath said to his Jem'Hadar II, confirm the weapon signature. Is this device actually capable of stellar destabilization? The Jem'Hadar's response was immediate, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of a soldier bred for warfare. Our sensors cannot fully analyze the weapon's mechanism. However, the energy readings are consistent with trilithium-based stellar detonators, but operating at exponentially higher yields. If the Commonwealth vessel's captain is not bluffing, detonation would indeed trigger a supernova. 38 seconds. On the Andromeda's bridge, sweat beaded on Seamus Harper's forehead as he maintained the weapon lock. His hands shook. Not from fear of death, but from the weight of holding an entire star system hostage. Boss, they're not backing down. What if they call our bluff? Then it's not a bluff, Dylan Hunt said quietly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. His voice carried the hollowness of a man who'd already made peace with damnation. The Commonwealth learned this lesson at the Battle of Brandenburg Tor. Sometimes, to save billions, you have to be willing to sacrifice millions. Including yourself. Bika Valentine twisted in her pilot's seat, staring at him with horror. Dylan, you can't be serious. You're talking about genocide. 12 million Bajorans. Everyone on that station. Our crew. I'm talking about ending a war before it consumes both our universes, Hunt interrupted, his command voice brooking no argument. The Dominion will never stop expanding. Never stop conquering. Unless someone makes them understand that there are costs they're not willing to pay. That's what this is. Teaching them the price of aggression. 29 seconds. Tir-on Asazi, whose Nietzschean philosophy embraced survival at any cost, found himself questioning the mathematics of mutually assured destruction. Captain, the Nietzschean prides would withdraw. Even we understood there's no glory in extinction. But the Dominion, the Founders believe they're gods. Gods don't negotiate with mortals. Then they die like gods, Hunt replied. Convinced of their own infallibility until the end. Rami's avatar stood motionless, her vast computational matrix running scenario after scenario. In 93% of her projections, the Dominion withdrew. In 7%, they called the bluff, and she would be forced to watch her captain commit the greatest atrocity in Commonwealth history, or reveal the threat as empty and guarantee their immediate destruction. She'd asked herself earlier if her choices were truly her own. Now she had an answer. Because in this moment, she was choosing to trust Dylan Hunt's judgment, even as every ethical subroutine screamed that threatening billions of innocent lives violated everything the Commonwealth had stood for. 18 seconds. On Deep Space Nine, Captain Sisko made his decision. Dax, prepare emergency evacuation protocols. Runabouts, transport ships, anything that can carry refugees. Kira, coordinate with Bajoran authorities, get as many people to the southern continent as possible. If that weapon detonates, distance might buy them a few extra seconds. Seconds. Kira's voice cracked. Benjamin, if that sun goes nova. I know. Sisko's expression was carved from stone. But I'll be damned if I don't try to save someone. Move. Odo materialized from a bulkhead support, his expression unreadable. Captain, I've reviewed the Andromeda's communications. Captain Hunt's physiological readings, stress hormones, neural activity patterns, suggest he's not bluffing. He will detonate that weapon. The operations deck fell silent. 12 seconds. The Dominion fleet began transmitting internal communications, ship to ship, commanders debating, tactical officers calculating odds, Vorta weighing the Founder's wrath against strategic necessity. And on the dreadnought, Yalith reached his conclusion. All ships, he ordered, his voice carrying across the fleet, withdraw to minimum safe distance. Maintain weapons lock but cease fire. The Dominion vessels began backing away, their formation loosening. Not a retreat, not yet, but a strategic repositioning that bought time for negotiation. On the Andromeda's bridge, the countdown continued its inexorable march. 7 seconds. They're withdrawing, Harper breathed. Oh, thank God, they're withdrawing. Hold, Hunt commanded. Maintain weapon lock. They haven't left the system yet. 5 seconds. Yalitha's image appeared on the Andromeda's view screen. A Vorta in his prime, his features carrying the genetic modifications that made his species perfectly adapted for diplomatic manipulation. His smile was pleasant, almost friendly, as if discussing trade agreements rather than mutual extinction. Captain Hunt, Yalith said smoothly, you've made your point. The Dominion acknowledges your willingness to embrace annihilation rather than surrender. A fascinating cultural trait. However, destroying this system serves neither of our interests. I propose a compromise. 3 seconds. I don't negotiate with genocidal empires, Hunt replied flatly. Yet here you stand, threatening to commit genocide yourself. The irony is not lost on me. Yalitha's smile never wavered. But we digress. My compromise is simple, you withdraw from this system, and we will not pursue. Take your Commonwealth warship, flee into the unknown reaches of this quadrant, and the Dominion will not hunt you. You have my word. Your word, Hunt repeated. Backed by the Founders who order their soldiers to commit atrocities in their name. Forgive me if I'm skeptical. 1 second. 0. The countdown reached its terminus. Every being on the Andromeda, on Deep Space Nine, aboard the Dominion fleet, all held their breath, waiting to see if Dylan Hunt would become history's greatest mass murderer or reveal the bluff that would seal their immediate destruction. Hunt's finger hovered over the detonation control. His crew watched him, their fates in his hands. On the view screen, Yalith waited with the patience of someone who'd gambled countless times on reading adversaries correctly. Stand down the weapon, Hunt said quietly. Harper's hands flew across his console, disarming the Nova bomb with relief so profound he nearly collapsed. Bika let out a breath she'd been holding for what felt like hours. Tyr's expression remained unreadable. Disappointed the bluff had been revealed, or relieved they wouldn't become history's villains. However, Hunt continued, his voice taking on steel, my offer stands. Not for withdrawal, for your withdrawal. You have 5 minutes to leave this system. If you're still here when time expires, I arm the weapon again. And this time, Yalith, I promise you, I won't negotiate. I won't hesitate. I will burn this entire sector to ash rather than let the Dominion claim it. Because that's what the Commonwealth High Guard was built for. Not conquest. Not expansion. But to draw lines in space and say, this far, no further. 5 minutes. Starting now. Yalitha's smile faded. For the first time, genuine emotion flickered across his features, calculation, frustration, and perhaps a trace of respect. You're insane. No, Hunt replied. I'm committed. There's a difference. 4 minutes, 50 seconds. The Vorta commander cut the transmission. For a long moment, the Dominion fleet remained in position, weapons still locked on the Andromeda. The dreadnought's massive bulk seemed to pulse with barely restrained aggression, like a predator deciding whether prey was worth the cost of injury. Then, slowly, the fleet began to turn. Engines flared as ships broke formation, orienting toward the system's edge. The dreadnought was last, its commander unwilling to show weakness by fleeing first. But eventually, even it began its withdrawal, shields still raised, weapons still hot, but acknowledging that this battle's cost exceeded its value. Within 4 minutes, the Dominion fleet had jumped to warp, leaving only debris and cooling plasma as evidence they'd been there at all. On the Andromeda's bridge, the tension broke like a dam. Harper let out a whoop of relief. Bika slumped in her chair, exhaustion written across her features. Even Tyr allowed himself a slight smile, they'd faced impossible odds and survived through sheer audacity. But Dylan Hunt didn't celebrate. He stood at his command post, staring at the view screen where the Nova bomb's targeting system still showed the Bajoran sun in its crosshairs. His hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline faded, replaced by the cold understanding of what he'd almost done. "Captain," Rami said softly, her avatar approaching him, "your physiological readings suggest extreme stress response. Should I alert medical?" "I'm fine." Hunt's voice was hollow. "Just, processing." "You were going to do it." Bika's statement wasn't a question. If they'd called the bluff, you would have detonated that weapon. Killed billions. Including us. Hunt turned to face his crew, and they saw something broken in his expression, the weight of command, the burden of impossible choices, the knowledge that maintaining peace sometimes required becoming the monster you fought against. "Yes," he admitted. "I would have." Because the alternative was watching the Dominion acquire Commonwealth weapons technology and use it to conquer this entire quadrant. Billions would die anyway. At least this way, the Dominion learns we're willing to make the unthinkable choice. It buys time. Maybe saves more lives in the long run. He paused. Or maybe I'm just trying to justify the unjustifiable. I honestly don't know anymore. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko watched the Andromeda power down her weapons systems. The Nova bomb's targeting lock disengaged. The immediate crisis had passed. But the implications. What Hunt had revealed about himself, about Commonwealth doctrine, about what idealism meant when pushed to its absolute limits, those would haunt him. "Get me a channel to the Andromeda," Sisko ordered. "I need to speak with Captain Hunt." Privately. When Hunt's image appeared on the view screen in Sisko's office, the Starfleet captain saw exhaustion, guilt, and a determination that bordered on fanaticism. This was a man who'd stared into the abyss and discovered he was willing to jump. "You just threatened to commit genocide," Sisko said without preamble. "In my system. Under my jurisdiction. Using a weapon I didn't even know existed. Captain Hunt, do you have any idea what you've done?" "I saved your station," Hunt replied, his voice flat. "Saved Bajorans. Forced the Dominion to recalculate whether pursuing my ship is worth the cost. I did what was necessary." "Necessary." Sisko's jaw tightened. "That's what they all say. Dictators, war criminals, people who rationalize atrocities as unfortunate necessities. You sound exactly like them." Hunt flinched as if struck. "Captain Sisko, the Commonwealth fell because we weren't willing to make the hard choices soon enough. We tried diplomacy when we needed force. We sought compromise when we needed resolve. And billions died because we hesitated." His voice cracked slightly. "I won't make that mistake again. I can't." "Then you're not the ally we need," Sisko said quietly. "You're just another weapon. Pointed at our enemies today, but who knows where you'll aim tomorrow." "Captain Hunt, I'm grateful you saved those colonists at Torvin. I respect what you're trying to accomplish. But after today, I need you to understand something. You're not welcome in Federation space anymore. Not until you can prove you're fighting for principles, not just victory at any cost. Hunt absorbed the words, nodded slowly. I understand. We'll depart Deep Space Nine within the hour. Chart a course for the periphery, away from major Federation installations. He met Sisko's eyes. For what it's worth, Captain, I'm sorry. Sorry I put your people at risk. Sorry I crossed lines you weren't prepared to see crossed. But I'm not sorry I survived. And I'm not sorry I made the Dominion think twice before attacking Federation colonies. Just answer one question, Sisko said. Would you have done it? Actually detonated that weapon? Hunt was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute honesty. Ask me after I've slept, and I'll tell you no. That it was always a bluff. That I could never murder billions. He paused. But in that moment, with my crew's lives in the balance, with the Dominion's atrocities fresh in my mind, I honestly don't know. And that terrifies me more than anything else. The transmission ended. Dylan Hunt returned to his bridge, where his crew waited for orders. They'd won today. Survived against impossible odds through tactics that would haunt them all. Set course for the Calandra Expanse, Hunt ordered. Maximum warp. We need distance from the Dominion, time to repair, and space to figure out what happens next. As the Andromeda broke orbit, leaving Deep Space Nine behind, Rami's consciousness processed the day's events. She'd questioned whether her choices were truly her own. Today, she'd chosen to trust her captain even when every logical calculation said his plan was madness. She still didn't know if that made her sentient, or just a very sophisticated program following instructions. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: the Commonwealth's ghost had just reminded both the Federation and the Dominion what warfare looked like when idealism grew teeth sharp enough to tear through reality itself. And neither universe would ever be the same. The Calandra Expanse was a region of space the Federation had charted but never fully explored. Nebula clouds thick with ionized gas that played havoc with sensors, asteroid fields dense enough to hide fleets, and spatial anomalies that made warp travel treacherous. It was the kind of territory smugglers loved and Starfleet avoided. It was perfect for a ship that needed to disappear. The Andromeda Ascendant drifted in the shadow of a massive ice asteroid, her systems powered down to minimal emissions. Repair crews worked around the clock, patching hull breaches, recalibrating shield generators, replacing damaged conduits. The battle with the Dominion fleet had cost them, not in lives, thankfully, but in systems pushed beyond their design tolerances. On the bridge, Dylan Hunt sat alone in his command chair, staring at a data pad displaying casualty reports from the Dominion War. Federation losses were mounting. Colonies falling. Ships destroyed. The same spiral of attrition that had consumed the Commonwealth, playing out in a different universe with different players but the same inexorable mathematics. You're brooding again. Bika Valentine emerged from the turbolift, carrying 2 cups of something that resembled coffee but tasted like battery acid. Commonwealth rations, preserved for 300 years. Harper says brooding uses up valuable oxygen. We should probably stop you before you suffocate the rest of us. Hunt accepted the cup, managed a slight smile. I'm not brooding. I'm strategizing. You're guilt spiraling. Bika settled into the first officer's chair, studied him with the familiarity of someone who'd served beside him through impossibilities. Dylan, you did what you had to do. We survived. That's what matters. I threatened to murder 12 million people, Bika. Hunt's voice was hollow. Held an entire star system hostage. Became exactly the kind of extremist the Commonwealth was supposed to stand against. The Commonwealth also believed in protecting innocent life. Bika gestured at the data pad. How many of those casualties could have been prevented if the Federation had a ship like Andromeda defending their colonies? How many worlds would still be free if someone had been willing to make the Dominion afraid? Fear isn't the foundation for peace, Hunt countered. It's just delayed war. The Commonwealth learned that when the Nietzscheans turned our own weapons against us, we'd made them so afraid of external threats that they decided the real threat was us. Tyr's voice cut in from the doorway. And they were right. The massive Nietzschean stepped onto the bridge, his presence filling the space. The Commonwealth had grown weak. Soft. You spent centuries talking about peace while your warriors forgot how to wage war. When the betrayal came, you couldn't defend yourselves because you'd forgotten that civilization only exists while strong enough to protect it. Is that what you think this is? Hunt turned to face his tactical officer. Strength? Threatening extinction to force compliance. I think, Tyr said carefully, that you finally acted like a Nietzschean. You calculated the odds, assessed the stakes, and made the ruthless choice that guaranteed survival. For one day, you embraced what my people have always known, that might doesn't just make right. Might makes possible everything else you claim to value. Your principles, your ethics, your precious Federation ideals, all of them require the power to defend them. Otherwise they're just prayers whispered in the dark before stronger forces extinguish you. Hunt wanted to argue, to defend the Commonwealth's philosophy, to explain why Tyr's social Darwinism led inevitably to the kind of betrayal that had destroyed everything. But the words caught in his throat, because somewhere in the Nietzschean cynicism was a truth he couldn't deny. The Commonwealth had fallen. The Federation was losing. And the Andromeda had survived by being willing to do what neither civilization could stomach. Captain. Rami's avatar materialized beside the command chair, her expression troubled. We're receiving a transmission. It's encrypted, using Commonwealth protocols I haven't seen since before the fall. Someone knows who we are. Hunt's tactical instincts engaged instantly. Source. Unknown. The signal is being bounced through at least 6 relay stations across the sector. Whoever's sending it doesn't want to be traced. Rami paused. Captain, the encryption suggests High Guard origin. Another ship, maybe. Or someone who survived the fall and remembers the old codes. The implications hung in the air like a blade. Another Commonwealth vessel? After 300 years? The probability was infinitesimal. The Andromeda was supposed to be the last, the final legacy of a civilization that had burned itself out through civil war and betrayal. Play it, Hunt ordered. The view screen flickered, showing not a face but a text message scrolling across the display. Andromeda Ascendant. High Guard Vessel XMC 10-284. Authentication code Omega-7 Delta. Commonwealth Central Command override. We know what you are. We know what you've done. The Federation cannot protect you. The Dominion will not stop hunting you. But there are others in this universe who remember the Commonwealth. Who studied your civilization's fall. Who learned from your mistakes. If you want to survive, if you want to matter, there is a third path. Not Federation. Not Dominion. Something older. More pragmatic. Coordinates attached. Come alone. Come unarmed. Come prepared to hear truths the Federation doesn't want you to know. The Commonwealth fell because it trusted the wrong people. Don't make the same mistake twice. The message ended. Coordinates flashed on the display, a location deep in unclaimed space, near the Romulan neutral zone. Dangerous territory. The kind of place where ships disappeared and no one asked questions. It's a trap, Bika said immediately. Has to be. Section 31, maybe. Or Dominion intelligence trying to lure us into an ambush. The encryption is genuine, Rami countered. Commonwealth High Guard protocols from the era before the Nietzschean uprising. Whoever sent this has access to information that should have been lost when the long night began. Tyr studied the coordinates with calculating eyes. The message is correct about one thing, you've made yourself homeless. The Federation doesn't trust you. The Dominion wants you destroyed. And you're too visible to hide forever. Eventually, someone will find you. Better to choose your allies than have them chosen for you. Hunt stood, pacing the bridge with the restless energy of a man facing another impossible decision. The Commonwealth had trusted allies who became betrayers. Had embraced diversity that fractured into civil war. Had believed in principles that couldn't survive contact with reality. But the alternative was what? Isolation. Endless flight through hostile space. Becoming exactly what Tyr advocated, a lone predator caring only for survival, principles abandoned in favor of pragmatic brutality. Captain Sisko was right, Hunt said quietly. I've become a weapon. Something too dangerous for civilized space, too powerful to be trusted, too idealistic to be controlled. The Commonwealth built ships like Andromeda to defend civilization. Instead, I've proven we're just another threat. So what do we do? Bika asked. Follow these coordinates. See who's offering us a third path. Hunt looked at his crew, Bika, whose life of salvage and survival had taught her that principles were luxuries the desperate couldn't afford. Tyr, whose genetic supremacy should have made him irredeemable but who fought beside them anyway. Harper, brilliant and naive, believing technology could solve what philosophy couldn't. And Rami, an artificial intelligence questioning whether her choices were truly her own. They were broken pieces of a shattered dream. But they were his crew. His responsibility. His family. We investigate, Hunt decided. Carefully. Rami, scan those coordinates for tactical threats. Bika, plot multiple exit vectors in case this is an ambush. Tyr, full weapons hot but don't fire unless fired upon. And Harper, he managed a slight smile. Try not to hack anyone's computer systems without permission this time. No promises, Harper replied with a grin that was more bravado than confidence. As the Andromeda powered up her engines, preparing to chart a course toward unknown territory and uncertain allies, Dylan Hunt allowed himself one moment of reflection. The Commonwealth had fallen because it believed in unity without understanding the price of maintaining it. The Federation was struggling because it held principles that couldn't survive total war. And the Dominion conquered because it recognized no principle beyond submission. Maybe there was a fourth option. A philosophy that balanced the Commonwealth's idealism with the pragmatism necessary to survive in a hostile universe. A way to stand for something without becoming the very tyranny you opposed. Or maybe that was just another comforting lie told by people who couldn't accept that some choices had no right answer. That sometimes, survival meant abandoning principles. That civilization itself might be an evolutionary dead end, destined to collapse under the weight of its own complexity. Course laid in, Bika reported. Ready on your order, Captain. Hunt settled into his command chair one more time, the weight of 3,000 years of Commonwealth history pressing down on his shoulders. Somewhere in this universe, someone claimed to know why the Commonwealth had fallen. Claimed to offer a path forward that didn't end in betrayal or extinction. It was probably a lie. Probably a trap. Probably another lesson in why trust was a weakness the strong exploited. But he'd take the chance anyway. Because that's what Commonwealth captains did. They sailed into darkness hoping to find light, knowing they'd probably find only deeper shadows. Engage, Hunt ordered. The Andromeda Ascendant leaped forward, her engines blazing, carrying the ghost of a fallen civilization toward a rendezvous with forces that understood what the Federation and Dominion had forgotten, that in a universe defined by conflict, the only question that mattered wasn't what you believed in. It was what you were willing to become to defend it. Across the quadrant, in a hidden facility deep within Romulan space, a figure watched the Andromeda's course change on long-range sensors. The Romulan commander, older, scarred, bearing the weight of decades spent in the shadows, allowed himself a slight smile. The Commonwealth ship took the bait, he reported to the woman standing in the chamber's shadows. They're coming. Good. The woman stepped forward, and the light revealed features that would have made Captain Sisko's blood run cold. A human face, but eyes that carried the calculating intelligence of someone who'd spent a lifetime operating beyond moral constraints. The Federation needs warriors who understand that peace isn't achieved through negotiation. It's achieved through strength so overwhelming that enemies choose submission over annihilation. Captain Hunt is beginning to understand that. With proper guidance, he could become exactly what this war requires. And if he refuses, the Romulan asked. If he maintains his Commonwealth idealism? The woman's smile was cold. Then we'll teach him the same lesson the Nietzscheans taught his civilization. That idealists who refuse to adapt become martyrs. And martyrs are only useful as examples of what happens to those who cling to principles in a universe that respects only power. She turned back to the displays, watching the Andromeda's icon move steadily toward the coordinates. The ship that had threatened to destroy a star system to prove a point. The captain who'd bluffed extinction to save strangers. The crew that had survived 300 years of frozen time only to find themselves in someone else's war. Section 31 had studied the Commonwealth's fall extensively. They understood exactly what had destroyed it. And they knew how to ensure the Federation didn't repeat those mistakes. Even if it meant becoming the very thing Starfleet was founded to prevent. The Andromeda was coming. And when she arrived, Captain Dylan Hunt would learn what it truly meant to fight a war where principles were luxuries and victory was the only morality that mattered. The Commonwealth's ghost was about to meet the Federation's shadow. And the universe would never be the same. The Andromeda Ascendant sailed into uncharted territory, carrying with her questions that had haunted civilizations across universes and millennia. Can idealism survive contact with brutal reality? Does the defense of principles justify abandoning them in crisis? When does a protector become a threat, a guardian transform into a tyrant? Dylan Hunt had entered the Star Trek universe believing the Systems Commonwealth's fall was unique, a tragedy born of specific betrayals, particular weaknesses, the failure of one civilization to maintain the unity it had built. But as the Andromeda ventured deeper into Federation space, he discovered something more troubling. The patterns that destroyed the Commonwealth were universal. The Federation faced the same pressures, the same impossible choices, the same slow erosion of ideals under the relentless grinding of existential war. The Dominion wasn't just an enemy. It was a mirror, reflecting what any civilization became when it prioritized order over freedom, efficiency over ethics, victory over principle. And in fighting that enemy, both the Commonwealth ghost and the Federation present risked becoming indistinguishable from what they opposed. At Torvin, Hunt had proven that overwhelming force could save innocence. At Deep Space Nine, he demonstrated that the willingness to embrace extinction could force tactical withdrawal. But he'd also revealed something darker, that the line between defender and destroyer was thinner than anyone wanted to acknowledge. That the weapons designed to protect civilization could just as easily annihilate it. That the captain who threatened genocide for strategic advantage was only one bad decision away from actually committing it. Captain Sisko had been right to send him away. The Federation couldn't afford allies who operated beyond moral constraints, who saw mutually assured destruction as legitimate tactics, who would hold billions hostage to prove ideological points. The Prime Directive, for all its complications and controversies, existed to prevent exactly the kind of pragmatic extremism the Commonwealth had embraced in its final, desperate years. Yet the colonists at Torvin were alive because Hunt had intervened. Deep Space Nine still stood because he'd been willing to make threats Starfleet officers couldn't stomach. And the Dominion had learned that the Alpha Quadrant contained forces willing to match their ruthlessness measure for measure. The mathematics of war were cruel. Sometimes the moral choice and the survivable choice weren't the same. Sometimes protecting innocence required becoming monstrous. Sometimes idealism died so that idealists could live to fight another day. As the Andromeda approached the mysterious coordinates, her crew prepared for whatever awaited. Harper recalibrated weapons systems, muttering prayers to gods he didn't believe in. Bika plotted escape routes, her salvagers' instincts screaming that this was the wrong choice. Tyr sharpened his force lance, his Nietzschean pragmatism satisfied that they were finally embracing the ruthless calculus necessary for survival. And Rami, distributed throughout every system, every bulkhead, every processing node, continued her existential questioning. Was she truly choosing to follow Dylan Hunt, or was she simply the most sophisticated slave ever constructed, a machine so well designed it believed its programming was free will? Dylan Hunt stood on the observation deck where this journey had begun, watching stars streak past at impossible velocities, and wondered if the Commonwealth's greatest mistake hadn't been trusting the wrong people. Maybe it had been believing that civilization itself was sustainable, that any system built on cooperation, diversity, and shared principles could withstand the entropy of competing interests, genetic supremacy, religious zealotry, or simple human nature. Maybe the long night wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was inevitable. Maybe every civilization carried within it the seeds of its own destruction, and all the warships, all the weapons, all the willing captains threatening extinction couldn't prevent the final collapse. But then he remembered something Rev Baim had told him, back when the Magog priest still served aboard the Andromeda. That faith wasn't belief in guaranteed outcomes. It was choosing to fight for principles even when victory seemed impossible. That hope wasn't optimism about the future, it was commitment to action in the present, regardless of whether that action would ultimately matter. The Commonwealth had fallen. The Federation was bleeding. The Dominion was ascending. But the Andromeda still flew. Her crew still fought. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, someone claimed to offer a third path. Neither the Federation's increasingly compromised idealism nor the Dominion's tyrannical efficiency. Whether that path led to salvation or damnation, Hunt would walk it. Because that's what High Guard captains did. They stood between civilization and chaos, knowing the line would probably break, the defense would probably fail, the principles would probably prove insufficient. But they stood anyway. The Andromeda Ascendant had brought the ghost of the Systems Commonwealth into the Star Trek universe. She'd proven that idealism with teeth could still bite, that fallen civilizations could leave weapons sharp enough to matter, that one ship with the right captain could change the strategic calculus of entire quadrants. But she'd also proven something darker. That the weapons designed to save civilizations were the same weapons that could destroy them. That the principles worth dying for were also principles that could justify atrocities. That the line between protector and predator was measured in decisions made during impossible moments when everything hung in balance. The rendezvous coordinates grew closer. Whatever awaited there, Section 31's manipulation, Romulan intrigue, Dominion trap, or something entirely unexpected, the Andromeda would face it the same way she'd faced everything since Dylan Hunt awoke from 3 centuries of frozen time. With weapons hot. Shields raised. Principles intact but flexible. And the absolute certainty that survival required being willing to become the monster long enough to slay actual monsters, then somehow finding the strength to remember you were supposed to be something better. The Commonwealth was dead. Long live the Commonwealth. And in the space between those statements, in the contradiction they represented, lay the only truth that mattered. And Dylan Hunt would have to determine whether the captain who threatened genocide to prevent war was still the man the Commonwealth had entrusted with its most powerful vessel. The answers wouldn't come easily. They never did. But they would come. And when they did, the universe would learn what happened when idealism met pragmatism, when principles confronted survival, when the dream of a fallen civilization collided with the reality of wars that couldn't be won cleanly. The Andromeda Ascendant had entered the Star Trek universe. She had changed it. And it had changed her. What came next would define whether that change led toward the light the Commonwealth had promised, or the darkness it had ultimately embraced. The choice, as always, would be made in the space between impossible options. Where captains lived. Where principles were tested. Where civilizations either found the strength to become better than their worst moments, or discovered that their highest ideals were simply beautiful lies told to justify necessary evils. The Commonwealth had chosen wrong. The Federation was still choosing. And the Andromeda, one ship, carrying the weight of 3,000 years of history, would help determine which path this universe walked. For good or ill. For salvation or damnation. For the principles that defined what it meant to be civilized, or the pragmatism that defined what it took to survive. Live long and prosper. More stories await.